What's up, Internet? So, when it comes to working on a car, you should never get discouraged because one project always gives you extra projects. For instance, I wanted to put a different converter in the Cutlass. It had like a 1800 to 2000 style converter, and it just always felt very lazy, didn't want to get up. So I went to a 2500 RPM style converter. And part of that is because I wanted better rear gears. This had like a 308 rear gear. So again, felt very lazy. It cruised okay, but it just never felt like it was putting down the power that the engine had. So if you're like, if you're doing gears and stuff, why is the hood open? Well, let me show you. So as you can see, I still have the transmission jack under there holding it because there's the cross member. The exhaust had to come off, and there's no rear end in the car. Well, the exhaust is completely off because the factory hangers you can see right there are ripped. So as I was putting the exhaust down, it stressed both sides, ripped the rest of the exhaust out. Right over there, you can see that one ripped, that was up there. So I have to get all new exhaust hangers, which I've got, to hang that back in there. And then, since I was putting a higher stall converter in there, I needed to run a bigger transmission cooler than the one in the radiator. So I had to deal with that. So, again, it's like, oh, well, where's the rear end in the car? Well, GM, in their infinite wisdom back in the 60s and 70s, decided that even though they were all one car company, everybody was going to make their own special stuff. So this is a 1970 Cutlass. It's a GM intermediate or A body, and they came with an 8.2 10 bolt. Well, most of them came with an 8.2 10 bolt. This is what I thought was in here. So I actually thought I found a really good deal on the internet for an 8.2 10 bolt posi and some 370-degree gears. Everything works good. Pull the rear end, go to start taking everything apart. Nothing seems to be lining up. Well, Oldsmobile had their own special Type O 12 bolt rear end, whatever. It's kind of unique. They only made it for a couple years. Not a lot of people use them. They can be strong, but whatever. But they only made two gear sets for them, a 342 and a 391. And there's only one guy who sells parts for them. And it's just, I don't know, doesn't work out. So couldn't use that. So then I was like, okay, am I going to rebuild it, get those parts, maybe go with just a 342, maybe a little bit better at cruising, but not as good off the line, or go with 391, be really aggressive with it. And it was still gonna be about $1,000 for all those parts. And then when I took the drums apart, the drums are all messed up. I don't know how I had rear brakes, which that wasn't, I didn't put that together. So things started multiplying, and it got to the point where it's like, do I find an 8.2 10 bolt and use the parts that I have and then still have GM stuff, or do I just buy once, cry once, go with a 9-inch? Well, as you can see, I went with a 9-inch. So it's a Speedway Motors GM A-body kit, 9-inch, nodular iron center section with 370 gears, clutch type posi, all that stuff. Well, then the axles were back ordered, but luckily they let me know. And I will say this, and I'm obviously not sponsored by Speedway Motors. I wish I was, because I do buy a lot of parts from them. Their sales team was amazing as far as ordering it, getting me all set up, and doing everything, letting me know where they were coming from, what warehouses, everything like that. So awesome. And the axles finally came in today, so I can kind of start putting that all together. But yeah, so that all what happened, and then I was like, okay, I still need the transmission cooler. And so that's why I'm back up at the front of the car. And I have the grills out so I can try to position where I want this transmission cooler. And then I had to run new lines, and I wanted stainless braided lines, and then trying to get those run where I needed to go. So I decided to go next to the engine underneath the frame mount and back to the transmission. And you're like, oh, where are the headers? Well, had to get positions, and plus they're a little rusty, so then the headers came out. So I wound up painting the headers. Headers got painted so they at least aren't rusty. And then I was thinking, I remember when I had my Camaro that I used to time attack with, it would get really hot even with the header paint and everything like that. I want to kind of cut down the temperature because I don't have AC or anything in this car, and I don't want it coming through the firewall. I'm going to put more extra insulation in the interior. So then, and I put new tires on it, even though it's not going anywhere. So then I was like, okay, I need to get header wrap. So now I need to wrap those. With that, fit those back in the car to make sure that the line's clear with everything. I need to mount the trans cooler, probably gonna run it to the radiator, make sure I got enough space for that. Once I get those mounted, then I can change out the exhaust hangers, get the exhaust hung back up in place, attached back to the collectors, put the trans cross member back in place. With the trans member back in place, I can then pull out the speedometer gear and get that set up so I can at least know what speed I'm going. Once that's all in there, then I can disconnect the original brake lines and get the 9-inch housing set up in there, get that hung, and then start assembling that. So one project turned into another project, into another project, into another project, and yeah. So as it is, project cars are the gift that keep on giving. And once I have this up and running, and I make sure that the gears and everything are broken in and everything feels good, the car's coming back apart again. Because originally I was gonna LS swap this car. Long ago, I put a 383 in it, and my big plan, I was gonna LS swap it. That's what I wanted, LS swap. Because I did that to the S10. The S10 runs great. I can drive it anywhere. It gets like 25 miles to the gallon. Just drive it on the highway, and that's with 410 gears. It starts up whenever I want. It's actually like my runaround car around town. And I beat on that thing and it just takes it. But in my area, 6-liter is expensive. I mean, you're looking at one that's beat up with 200,000 miles on it, and people still want $1,500 for it. And then I still want to ring it and all that. So $1,500, put another $500 into a decent rebuild, and then you still need headers for it, and you would need an oil pan and all those things, just nickel and dime. And it was going to cost like another $4 to $5 grand just to do a really good LS swap. And I know there's cheaper ways to do it, but to do it properly the way I wanted, it was going to be expensive. And I was like, you know what? I got the 383. And the 383 is, I have the engine dyno sheet. It made 400 plus horsepower, I think 410 horsepower, and 450 foot-pounds of torque. And that's with iron Vortec heads. Eventually I might change the cam and go with Edelbrock E-Tech heads, since I want to stick with the Vortec manifold and everything for the fuel injection system I got, because that's the other reason it's coming apart. So when I was going to do fuel injection, I really, really wanted the Edelbrock Phytech, or the Edelbrock ProFlow kit. And it wasn't in the cards. It's like a $3,000 kit, but it manifold, everything, it just didn't have the money for it after all the money I dumped into the car already. So I compromised and I got the Phytech kit. And Phytech kit hasn't been bad. It starts, it runs, it revs, it drives, but it just never quite got what I wanted. And it's not about, making it look like it has a carburetor. Like the fact that I was going to LS swap it, it wasn't going to look original anyway. So while I was, searching Facebook Marketplace like I do all the time, I found an Edelbrock ProFlow XT kit for Vortec small block, and it was an insanely good deal, and I bought it, and it's brand new. So I'm gonna go with that. So I'll have something a little unique, and everyone's like, oh, small block Chevy, what's unique? The Profo kits aren't as common. It'll have a nice look to it. It's not a show car, but you know, at least when you pop the hood, it'll have a little bit of a wow factor. So it just got to the point where I was like, yep, I'm just gonna start selling off the LS stuff, keep the small block, you know, you can keep this thing running with, you know, like duct tape and bubble gum pretty much anywhere in the country. And parts are cheap for it. So that's what I decided to do. And it came down to being honest with myself. The Cutlass, I'm never making a race car. It's too valuable to me. It has too much sentimental value. It's never going to be a race car. The S10, that one, I do want to drag race. I'm going to do more stuff to it. And if I crash it, God forbid, that'd be bad because I barely fit in that thing. So they're going to have to jaws of life me out of it. But I can find another S10 shell for like $1,000, swap over stuff, build it. I mean, I've got, you know, almost nothing into that truck. The Cutlass, I don't want to do that. So do I want it to be fast and fun? Absolutely. But do I want it to be so out of control and at risk of blowing up constantly or crashing? No. So something a little unique, something that's fun, that's kind of where I'm going. But with that whole rant and rave, yeah, everything is snowballed. This car, like most cars, I'm really good at taking a running and driving car, pulling it into my garage and making it not a running, driving car. So, get back to work, hopefully have everything back together and running within a few weeks. But unfortunately, you know, when you're a family man, you got, you know, dance recitals to take kids to, and, you know, weekends were with chores and cutting lawns and stuff like that. So you got to do what you got to do. But don't get discouraged on your project, especially if you want to do it right. Things will snowball. Just stay focused. It'll get where you need to get. Till next time, go work on your hot rod.